Hello, YouTubers. My name is Jack Gowan, and I'm planning to do a series of videos about when I review books, and I'll be reviewing books I'm interested in. It's going to cover a wide range of books. There's not going to be a particular genre, I don't think. I do like dark fantasy, so there probably will be at least a couple of books in that area. But I try to read quite widely. There'll probably be some nonfiction as well. But my book for today is probably a book that I normally wouldn't read. But here we are. It's a book. It's a novel. It's The Shadow of the Galilean by Gerd Theissen. You can clearly see from the front cover that it's a Christian book, and it is basically a historical novel about the times that when Jesus was living. What I would say, don't be scared. It's not a book that's pushing Christianity on you. So if you're a non-believer and you're like, oh, why would I read this? It's not pushing Christianity on you per se. Although what it is doing is it's very much about this guy Andreas. He's a merchant, and he's basically trying to understand what's going on with these different religious organizations and communities in Israel, Palestine, however you want to call it, at the time of when Jesus was. And I think it, in that sense, I do think it is useful for people if you're just curious as to what it was like there, and you want a bit more information about some of the main players at this time period, particularly from obviously from the supporting the Christian story. But it's not a book about Jesus doing miracles, etc. It does distill Jesus' main points, and I think it does a pretty good job of that. I think it's a pretty informative book if you don't coming from perspective you don't really know much about the story. I mean, everyone in the West at least will have the basic understanding, but if people want to have a bit more understanding of what it was like at that time, I think it's a pretty good job. I'm going to just throw my review out straight away. I'm giving it a 3.5 out of 5. Yeah, I think that it's good. Though I think it's informative, but I think that in terms of the story itself, I do think it's a bit light, it's a bit weak. So if it was just, I mean, obviously this is such a massively important event for you know for the West. But the in because it's actually about Andreas, and if you're a non-believer, there isn't much in terms of the story. There isn't much going on. I mean, there's not much in terms of plot development. There's not much in the way of any suspenseful moments. You're not particularly engaged in liking this character, Andreas. To a certain extent, I mean, it in a way is a sort of a wrapper. How I'd see it as a wrapper to sort of like, if you want a bit better understanding of like what's going on in Christianity at this time, you want a bit sort of like an understanding of Jesus' main teachings, but you don't really want the full on reading the New Testament experience. You can, as people, you can read it. I think that it's accessible both for Christians and non-Christians alike. It's not pushing a Christian message at all at you. So, in that respect, I do think it succeeds. But yeah, story wise, yeah, it's a bit light. I'd say maybe 2.5 out of 5 if I was going to just on the story. But because of the information, yeah, I thought it was interesting. So I'm giving it, being maybe slightly generous and giving it 3.5 out of 5. If you just want to know that, then that's fine. I am going to talk more in detail about the story now. And I'm going to go right ahead and do that now. So you can read the book, but otherwise, I'm just going to basically tell you the whole story in the couple of minutes I've got left. So basically, as I said, it's about this guy Andreas. He's a Jewish merchant. The book starts off with him being thrown into a prison in Jerusalem. He accidentally was caught up in a riot, and the Romans have basically just pushed him and along with a bunch of other people into the prison. Interestingly enough, he can speak Greek. That's what a lot of the educated people do, can speak Greek, and he can communicate well with the Romans. The Romans realize he's a pretty valuable person. They know he's got a business. They know he's a merchant. They know that he in particular isn't a threat. But what they want to make use of him, and they're basically blackmailing him. They're saying like, if you don't work with us, we're basically just we're gonna push you around all these prison systems. We're gonna really screw up your businesses, and it's gonna be really painful for you. So he's almost left with no choice but to work with them. And what they basically look after is a better understanding of the religious organizations at the time in Jerusalem. No, sorry, in Israel, Palestine area, because it is quite yeah, it's quite a volcanic time period. There's a lot of eruptions of riots and like unhappiness in the Judea area, along with the area that like in conjunction next to it, which is in Galilee, where King Herod rules. Yeah, they really just want a better understanding of these groups and try and work out which groups are threatening and which ones are harmless, sort of hippies, basically. Um, and yeah, so this guy John the Baptist, no, sorry, no, totally wrong. This guy Andreas, rather, um, he he agrees, and he, interesting enough, he in the moment he doesn't, he does, his business is going quite well. I mean, he does sort of, there's a clear point where he's making quite good money, and he's making quite good money as a Jew selling his products to other Jews, because you can actually get a sort of a premium doing this. Whereas like the Gentiles, like the non-Jews, they will actually have a harder time selling their products, the olive oil, grains, etc., to Jews, because it doesn't come from a Jewish source and it's not seen as pure. This is his perspective. I mean, it's not. I wouldn't say it's an anti-Semitic perspective at all. They're not. This isn't the right intention, but they are very much, just saying, like, there is a very much a Jewish community, and there's very much a non-Jewish community, and that's in particular with the Romans, but I think there's other groups as well, such as the Greeks in the area. Yeah, and so this guy Andreas, he has two slaves, interesting enough, and their first sort of mission, because they are working with the Romans, is to go to the community called the Essenes, and they are led by this guy John the Baptist. So they're basically trying to work out what this guy is. These guys, John the Baptist, who sort of Andreas is hire, basically he wants people to give up all their possessions, and that's not particularly what. Yeah, Andreas isn't particularly happy about that. But anyway, he does think they're harmless. But what materializes as he's on his way there is that John the Baptist has been murdered. Well, no, rather been executed by King Harold, who's actually in control of that area. He's been basically been executed because John the Baptist is complaining about the sort of immorality of King Herod and his wife, because they basically there was King Herod's wife was married to King Herod's brother, and then they divorced, and then King Herod married this woman, and John Baptist was very much against this. What's interesting is that one of King John Baptist's disciples is Jesus. John Baptist baptizes Jesus. Yeah, if you didn't know that, I didn't. And I don't know much about the Jewish faith. I don't know much about Christianity, for being fairly honest. But what I do know is that sorry, but no, my main point I'm waffling on about is that it yeah, John Baptist is very much someone who's baptizing people. I don't know if this is how common baptism was prior to John Baptist, but he's very much doing this, and he's seen as very slightly different from the way he's doing this, and his sort of purification with water. But as I say, one of his disciples is Jesus, and people are saying the next community that um, Andreas has to go to learn about is Jesus. And and what's happening then, the rest of the story is that Andreas is going around Galilee trying to almost catch up with the trying to find this group of Jesus and his disciples and where they are. But he's hearing basically stories about them. And he's hearing like ideas of other teachings, and I think it's quite nicely done, because Andreas is almost horrified at the beginning about some of his teachings, because again Jesus is quite critical of rich people, and you're hearing that, and Andreas isn't particularly happy about some of the stuff he's hearing, and he wonders if this guy's a bit of a madman. You hear about him, some of his teachings about loving thy neighbor, and again it's sort of Jewish, but it's sort of a new twist on it, and the way some of the teachings on that. He's talking a lot about forgiveness as well, and yeah, and all throughout these times, and I'm not going to go through the whole all of his teachings around that, but it all this time he's basically you never actually see Jesus in this whole story. You never actually see him. You're very much hearing reports of this guy going around, and then it culminates obviously in Jesus being crucified, and you do hear about that. And what's interesting is some of the things that I found that were interesting about it was yeah, this sense that there was a lot of people that were threatened by Jesus, because you do hear that Jesus has gone down to Jerusalem. I didn't really have this sense before this that Jesus basically was spending most of his life in the countryside, and it doesn't I didn't get the sense that he was particularly educated. I mean, he may have been, yeah. I didn't get the sense that he was at all. He came from quite a modest background, and he was very much traveling from like small towns, it feels like, and preaching there. Um, where he is talking about there are some conversations about his the miracles that he does, but it's more like this guy's wondering how to explain it, like when he's feeding like the 4,000 people. I think it's one of the miracles, but this guy Andreas is saying like, yeah, this probably isn't true, but what it is about is Jesus recommending that you almost his teaching is encouraging people to give to others. And so what really probably happened when this miracle 4,000 was that people from around the surrounding area were bringing their sort of like supplies of food to help feed the people, or these followers that were following Jesus at the time. So he's very much trying to give a sort of like almost non-religious perspective to actually it, but at the same time he's more and more appreciating this guy Jesus. And like I said, I mean, yeah, as we know, Jesus gets crucified. He's giving an interesting context on that. I mean, you do get the sense that Jesus was complaining about some of the activities that were happening in the temple. I mean, stuff like, I mean, I, I think it's stuff like money lending. I mean, he is talking about that the fact that there's a lot of people and merchants, it seems like, to be making money in the temple, and he just isn't particularly happy about this. And one of the interesting things that I didn't know, sorry, I know this is obvious for a lot of you, but I didn't know that Pontius Pilate, when Jesus was captured along with other people in Jerusalem, because I think there was like a public order offense or something like that. I think a few Jewish groups complaining about him. Pontius Pilate gave a group of people the option to select one person to be saved, and they basically didn't save Jesus. And there's a lot of the guy, this merchant guy, is thinking about it. He's going like, there's all these people who are against basically Jesus at this time. It's not, the Romans sort of see him as a threat, because he was doing a lot of his teachings almost of like kindness and forgiveness. In some ways they were threatening to the Romans, because for various reasons. Along with that, there was, yeah, he was definitely getting wider and wider popularity, it looked like. Some of the merchants in Jerusalem weren't particularly happy, because he was against some of the sort of financial activities in the temple, because they weren't seen as like holy, etc., etc. So yeah, you're hearing about it, but you're not really getting this. They don't dwell too much on the crucifixion, in terms of like the going to huge details about how shocking and how awful and how horrifying it is. You're very much even seeing the crucifixion from afar. And yeah, it ends on this guy sort of like thinking about Jesus while he's sort of like doing some of his financial activities, and you are getting the sense that this guy at the end, this Andreas guy, who's quite money oriented at the beginning, is becoming a bit more grounded and a bit more like caring about people. So yeah, I mean, that's my thoughts on the book. I thought it was interesting. I don't know if many people would read it. But no, I thought it was interesting, and yeah, that's me. Thanks for listening.